We go together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my sister, the President of the African Business Council. You raised quite a number of points, reiterating the importance of the Made in Africa standards, and with it, the issue of industrial design, and also the importance of business incubation, as well as research and development that is anchored on boosting innovation. You highlighted the 10-ins, and you also highlighted the importance of value chain mapping. We are doing that with the UNIDO, and as a sponsorship by GIZ and the International Trade Center. We plan to cover about 42 products across Africa, so that one is underway. The issue of information comes back again, and the question of training. Now, training is very, very important here, if I may highlight. The Chief Executive Officer of Equity Bank indicated that Africa accounts for about 3% of GDP, with a population of 17% of the global population. Actually, right now, it's 17.5% of the global population. Now, contrast that with China, which also has 17.5% of the population and accounts for 18% of global GDP. Let's go to the third presenter, so that after that we go into discussion, and I'll invite Madam Flavia Busingia, the Director of Customs and Trade at the East African Community. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And when Dr. Mangi was concluding his remarks, he just said, you do not say that you have not heard. So meaning that you have heard and you have what it takes to implement or to act. So from our perspective, we think that the region has done what it takes to simplify, to develop strategies and policies that facilitate cross-border trade and allowing the private sector to access markets across the continent. But what kind of investment do we look out for? Do we look out for our traditional investment been expanding? Some of the areas of investment require, you think twice before you, for example, go to Ghana to take your products, because you're looking at your health, for example. Have we invested enough in terms of the health infrastructure? If I get to Ghana, am I able to get medical access? Am I able to use my card that I have for Jubilee to access medical services in Accra? So those are the areas that we need to open up to and think about diversification in terms of investment, and also producing the quality products that can be able to compete across the continent. But on the side of the government, we have tried to harmonize. As East Africa, you know very well that we implement a common trade policy as a customs union and a common market. So it means our private sector are able to benefit from those policies that have been harmonized across the region and enjoy the facilitation that are provided for by those instruments. The NTBs, we also have worked tirelessly together with the private sector. I know Vimari will not agree with me, but I know that we have done quite a lot in terms of elimination of NTBs. Yes, they do arise from time to time, but we try as much to address some of those NTBs. If we go to the market issue or the finance, access to finance, we are talking about private sector. We are able. What is it that we don't have? We have to do, but do we have the capacity to produce? Do we have if you look at the small and medium enterprises, they contribute about 80%, but how do they contribute? How do they access the financial, what do the financial institutions facilitate to help the SMEs to grow? We are talking about digital trade, and we have developed an e-commerce strategy to help the region to trade digitally. But are we able, our private sector, ready to exploit that opportunity? Do they have access to internet? Do they have access to the instruments that are required to digitally trade? So those are some of the aspects that we need to look into as we access the markets. Of course, I won't emphasize so much in terms of market access, because if I have to produce, I must know, where do I have to trade my goods? Where do I take, if I go to Zambia, for example, who am I trading with? So that is very critical, and we need to really address that. Capacity building, we have undertaken a number of capacity building, creating awareness on the continental market or the African continental free trade area. But then there is still lack of understanding. The guided trade initiative that is being piloted by 3 countries in East Africa, what is it that the private sector in other countries are doing to ensure that all our countries are under the guided trade initiative? As a community, we have identified a number of, we have identified the countries, or we are supporting the countries that are not yet under the guided trade initiative by identifying the gaps, the farms to match make with the counterparts in the rest of Africa. And we have also undertaken trainings and awareness. We have also identified the products, the specific areas of trade for them to be able to participate. Honorable Chair, thank you. Those are my contributions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director Butingia, for that presentation, which brought on quite a number of issues. The question of awareness creation came up, just like capacity building, issues of market access to finance, the cross-border checks, diversification, quality, which is made in Africa, and harmonization of customs policies and procedures, and how you are dealing with non-tariff barriers. Now, you have listened to the presentations. I think as we now go into the discussion phase, there is one question which was raised by Mr. Shah. And the question was, what is stopping us in Africa? So as you make the reactions to the presentations, I will encourage all of you to see if you can answer that question. So who would like to make a contribution at this stage? You raise your hands. I say, gentleman there. Go ahead. Be mindful of the time. If there are any questions, ask specific questions. If you're answering that question raised, feel free to do so, but be mindful of the time. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ambassador. Just to respond to the question raised by Vima Shah, the issue is the trust. And I think the trust is the most important currency between the government and the private sector. I was looking at Singapore. Singapore, they are number one in terms of what you call economic freedom index. It measures how citizens respect the policies, how they work with their government in terms of accountability. So I think we need to inculcate, build that trust based on accountability. What the private sector wants from the government is that you are accountable. The policies are there, as my sister Flavia mentioned. We have excellent policies and strategy, Ambassador. But the issue it is implementation of those policies and the feedback mechanism that the government gives to the private sector. So how do we unlock that? How do we ensure that we have accountability and a feedback mechanism so that those policies, every annually, Your Excellency, you mentioned, should we have this forum quarterly or annually? We could have this forum annually, but with accountability. I recall we signed this agreement, CFTA, in 2018 in Kigali. 5 years down the road, we are still talking about the negotiation of the protocols. 5 years down the road. Do we have a sense of urgency in what we are doing? The commitment from the government, the leadership has been expressed, but are we ready to implement? So when you move here, even from East Africa, we've been singing as the EABC borderless East Africa for our people. Farmers, producers are constrained by our individual policies. Can we walk the talk? Can we be serious and have really a concrete mechanism in terms of accountability, in terms of feedback between the government and the private sector? Have a kind of a contract, a social contract between the government and the private sector. I submit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Trust and accountability under the rule of law. That is noted. Yes, my brother.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. As wait for the mic.
Then
Okay,
we'll give him after you make a presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. As he waits for the mic, mine is straightforward. It's just a question that goes to the AFCFTA Secretariat. As a lawmaker, I'm Françoise Umukiza. I come from the East African Legislative Assembly, EALA, and I think I'm the only lawmaker here. I thank EABC in collaboration with Customs and Trade for the invite. I'm really honored and humbled. You know, I'm also the chairperson of the Committee on Agriculture, Tourism, Natural Resources. We have 3 in 1. I have heard from AFCFTA SG representative that they have got 22 schedules as far as the implementation of AFCFTA is concerned. I didn't hear from food and security. I just have heard, you know, from tourism and the natural resources and the others. And you know how important this AFCFTA trade-related, trade liberalization, trade facilitation is food-based, food products, value chains, competitiveness are based on food security. So I would like to ask, you know, how are they approaching this without having the shadow among the 22 that we are working on food security to make sure we go zero hunger, you know, we go wealth, we go health, you know, because we have to avoid hunger or what, but wealth and also health citizens as far as Africans are concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. They are going to be given the opportunity to answer that question. How are you dealing with the issue of food security in the African continental free trade area? You have the floor, my brother.
Hello. I would like to comment as a private sector, as an investor. If I am an investor, I will ask myself, is this country in Africa is investable? What I need as an investor? First, I need that my money, when I put money in this country, I can get it out. Some country is very difficult to take your profit outside again. Second, what is the interest rate? Each project will need some sort of financial leverage. So interest rate in Africa, we are talking about 15 to 25, sometimes higher. This is very high. We are talking about zero interest to 5% in Europe and United States. So the cost of production is hurdled or increased by the interest rate of the project. Third, the tax rate. Tax rate is very high in most African countries. We have a country here in East Africa that have corporate tax rate of 35%. 35%. No wonder this country is one of the poorest in the world. If you go to Switzerland, tax rate is 12.5. If you go to Ireland, tax rate is 12.5. Why we are starting with 20 and 25 tax rate? So you put tax rate, corporate tax rate plus interest rate, you got very expensive products that you cannot sell even in your country. It becomes cheaper to buy from India or China because they don't have this. It's cheaper even to buy from Europe. Then comes a free trade area and you have a free borders and no custom. But how much is custom? Some goods you have like 5% custom. So if you don't have a real protection for Africa on the border, this 5% doesn't mean anything because people will still go and buy the equipment from Europe or from India or from China. So can I get my money? Tax rate, interest rate, the real protection for the border of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those are very, very pertinent questions. And we can also try to bring into the picture the question of tax incentives. A lot of African countries offer tax incentives to promote foreign direct investment. And sometimes they also offer it to local investors. The African Tax Administration Forum has been working with the United Nations to aggregate the value of those tax incentives. And the figure they've come out, preliminary figure, is $220 billion US. Contrast that with the annual FDI, foreign direct investment flows to Africa of about $100 billion US. So we have heard the message. We need to improve the investment climate by promoting macroeconomic policies of low interest rates as well as low taxes. So that has been heard. The director of ceremony would indicate to me when we should stop because we started late, but I see a hand over there. So I'll give you the floor. So you indicate when we need to go for lunch, and there's another hand there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much for other panelists.
Sorry, no, there's another gentleman with the white hat there. He was the first one to raise his hand. If you can give him the opportunity. Okay.
I think I was first.
Okay, since you're already there, it's okay. Be patient. Eh? Okay, he has obliged. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, and my name is Suleiman. I'm come from Somalia. I think that question is very restricted to sometimes even to ask ourselves because in including this conference, I think we not pay ourselves. So I think we are not independent, and I think we, as some of the bank say, the CEO, if I'm not wrong, I'm sorry, sorry for overtake that person. I think so. The trust, I think it's fundamental. Because our private sector, they are not paying even the conferences that the people come in. So still, we say we come in here, and I think we are not even independent economically. So the Belgium and Canada and other partners, they are paying this sometimes in conferences. So I think that's even another insecurity issue for that, saying we are not going ahead. So I think till our private sector people are ready to take the lead, I think we still here. And also the one, it's a leadership. So I think the leadership and private sector role, if it's going ahead, I think we have moved. Unless we will sit down here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Somebody was whispering that there's also the element of donor dependence. Now, the next gentleman, and we'll do one more after him. Behind there, yes, you'll be given the floor. Your son? No, the son. So, no, I think, okay, two more. The gentleman there, the lady, and yourself. Then we'll close it. We'll give the panelists to do the responses. There are so many people requesting, because I'm told we started very late.
Thank you.
We have noted. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Caleb Ngala, youth leader of one of the informal settlement in Kenya, which is Madare, and also I'm representing Madare informal settlement dwellers in this forum. The biggest question on behalf of the East Africans or even Africans youth is unemployment. And this issue can only be addressed if we come up with the mechanism and ways of coming up with employment way. But there is no that place for all youths to be employed. Many of youths in the informal settlement areas and the vulnerable communities are very much interested to be job creators, but not job seekers. What is the African Union and the East African community are doing to close the gap of job seekers in East African community? One of the solutions that we have as youths in East African community and also the African at large is to empower youths through soft skill trainings. Can we have more vocational training centers across the Africa so that our youths can learn to be mechanic, to be plumbing, to be tailors, so that we can close the gap of job seekers and create the big gap of youths who can do their own job. The second thing is taxation. We have a lot of companies that are interested to do business with Africa, but the biggest problem is taxation. And through this taxation, makes even those companies that are existing in Africa, especially in my country, they are closing to other countries. Can we have at least a good way how we can bring more, lobby for more investors and take care of things like taxation? If you take a look of the Bidco company is in Kenya and in other parts of Africa, but their commodity in Kenya, the price is totally different with maybe in Tanzania or in Uganda. Maybe in Uganda it's very cheap, but if you come in Kenya, the same commodity is very much expensive. Let me talk about the thing like salad. Can we have equal taxation so that we can have more investors to employ our youths? Because we want to reduce the crime, we want to reduce teenage pregnancies, we want to reduce gender-based violence, and we can only reduce this thing if we close the gap of unemployment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The issue of youth unemployment and the tax rebates or tax incentives has been raised, and it will be answered. Now, the gentleman here, then the lady after this. I'll come this side. Just be patient.
Thank you very much.
Two more of this side, then I'll close.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Simon Kaheru from the East African Business Council from Uganda. Here dressed in a Ugandan-made shirt. And I'm not just here to make a fashion statement. I fully agree with what the panelists have said, and I like what Dr. Amani raised around the different points of controversy on this continent. And she mentioned textiles and the opportunity there. Now, I'm not going to talk about just textiles. One of the key issues that we face, and we keep talking about it as a continent, is our mindset. Our mindset. And every time we talk about things like trade, growing trade and business in Africa, we are talking about it from there, but doing something very different. In the room right now, everybody's wearing European suits, apart from that gentleman and myself, and that lady, but we are accountable. The majority are taking jobs to factories outside the continent, which that investor there highlighted the reasons for. What makes us, from the beginning, choose the wrong options? And how do we address that? Information may be one thing, but changing the mindset of all these Africans so that we work more towards uniting rather than fighting will cause the actual difference that will implement a continental free trade area that works. I can give you 101 examples of countries that are consistently blocking, even within the East African community here, blocking the growth of trade and business. People who are even refusing to speak the same language, yet they can. Why? Our mindset just is not in the right place. And when we're in these great rooms here, we are discussing the best ideas, but we need to get out there and make all these Africans implement them. And I hope that the panel up there, because Dr. Manyi, for instance, was heading up the Africa Business Council, I hope you stay in the rooms where that change can be made. And Bimal, you said, let's go together. We are all in this together. We're ready to work with you, to work together, to move trade and business in Africa to the right place so that people are importing, Chinese are importing from here rather than vice versa. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your message is loud and clear. The mindset is a non-tariff barrier. How do we remove it? Madam, you have the floor. It will be responded to.
Thank you. My name is Wama Horonadia, CEO of Data System, a software company from East Africa, originally from Rwanda. So I wanted to thank all the panelists for very insightful ideas, which I believe they were very well prepared, and they are tackling key points. I have noted few from the different discussion, especially from Dr. Mwangi and Mr. Vimarsha, where we need to push African to produce food for Africans. One of the key problem I see is that there's only few African, especially the youth, that understand the importance of becoming farmers or venturing into agriculture business. So the solution is not even as complicated as we think. The problem is about information sharing. People need to get out of the city and go and discuss at the university or in the village for the youth to understand why it is very important. And if necessary, in the case, for example, of getting cereals, it has been identified that Angola, Tanzania, and Ethiopia only could feed the whole Africa. So why can't it be a resolution from African Union to take action and let us understand the rest of Africans how we can help? Do they need people? We have a lot of people who are unemployed. Giving out 6 months of your time to go to do such a noble job, which is of our concern, I think a lot of people will do it for free. We have seen a lot of young people who have liberated their country. It wasn't because it was fashion, but because they understood the emergence of the action. So I think from the point where we are, there is an emergence of making it mandatory for every Africa country, especially East African countries, to support Tanzania or to support Ethiopia or Angola to come together to make food accessible for everyone. So coming back to manufacturing now. Manufacturing at this point...
Could you summarize?
Yes, I'm summarizing. At this point in where we are, I think we need to embrace artificial intelligence. There is nothing we could do without implicating technology at a high level to make manufacturing a possibility. So a lot of scientists, countries, East African community, I see a lot of things you have done. To come here, I just used my Rwandan ID. So this is also something you can do. Use the youth to come up with ideas on how we can use artificial intelligence and technology to come up with a solution to this point. But mostly, I insist on mentorship. Today we had a lot of great insightful from people who are very, how can I say, very, they have a lot of things they could share with everyone. But we don't have a platform, we don't have any social media that is designed for African, where we can access some of you people to contribute to the things you could do. And we combine the thinking and innovation spirit of youth with the experienced people like you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. With respect to agriculture, I think just to provide information that at the African Union, we are collaborating with the African Export-Import Bank, the African Development Bank, and the African Business Council in the development of what we call the Agro Program. Through this program, we are going to really promote cross-border investments in the field of agriculture, from primary production to agro-processing, as well as the supply of inputs into the agricultural endeavor. And the pilot phase that is being done now is involving Zambia and Zimbabwe, but it will cover all the 5 regions of Africa in order to promote food security. Thank you. This side now, we'll start with the lady. I think there was a hand there, then the gentleman, and we close to enable our colleagues.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Santa. I stand on the existing protocol. I'm an East African, but specifically from Uganda. Is when we talk about these continental issues coming in. Secondly, standardization of products is a big issue. Right now, Uganda and South Sudan has an issue. Uganda and Kenya has an issue. Do we call ourselves a bloc? It's not. So we need, number one, standardization of products. Let all the standard units of East Africa, first and foremost, agree that maize from Uganda means maize from East Africa. Groundnuts from Rwanda means groundnuts from East Africa. Oil from Uganda, oil from Kenya, and the South Sudan, DRC, are the same. We speak same language. Number three, with business, security is paramount. Where do you put South Sudan? Where do we put DRC? They are our brothers and sisters. If we don't talk about security, we are not talking about business. Because if you go at the border of these two countries, there are issues to deal with. And yet we are supposed to do business in East Africa. Now I'm talking about production cost in East Africa is very high. Electricity is generated from Uganda, for example. I give that one because I come from there. But the cost of electricity is very high. And it is not even consistent. It's not stable. And I have very good products in Uganda. How do I bring it to Kenya? When somebody asks me, can you supply me ABCD? I won't sign any contract at all because I know power is not inconsistent. It's inconsistent. So we have issues in East Africa. I'm not going to talk about Africa. I must start, charity begins from home. I cannot talk about the continental thing. Lastly, I'm going to talk about unemployment. We harvest human resources every year from tertiary institution. Where do these people go? I want this question answered, unless otherwise it's going to be difficult for this AFCTA. It's going to be very difficult. But I'm talking about East Africa because I'm a mother. My children are at home. They're riding this motorcycle. He has a master. He has a degree. What are we going to do with these ones? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. AFCFTA. Okay. The Director Businga is going to answer the questions you raised. The gentleman there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you.
Oh, I had in mind there. Anyway, go ahead. Then you hand it over to your colleague.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Excellency. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ebiekure Jasper Radiri, Secretary General, All Africa Association for Small and Medium Enterprises. Your Excellency, I'm very interested in statements that you made, statements made by Dr. Amani and also Mr. Shah. Let me begin with your statement. Your statement gives room for concern. You said multiple conferences on private sector forum. The idea of having one event in the continent. I think that resonates very well from our side or from the side of the SMEs. Now, the reason is this. We are having too many conferences, and like Mr. Shah also said, NATO. You know, it's more like NATO, no action, talk only. So, but programs coordinated by the African Union should have a lot of action and feedbacks coming out of it. Now, particularly, I would like to say that engagements like this give room for peer review mechanisms within private sector and then public-private dialogue, PPDs. But is this really happening? Is it giving us what we want? Can we talk about broadening the conversation towards having a private sector bill of rights that will protect the interest of SMEs, protect the interest of entrepreneurs? At the borders, all the borders in Africa, you have issues. Even in this era of the AFCFTA, we have issues with the customs, with all the plethora of agencies at the border. We have not been able to address it properly. And again, the border communities, they don't even know what AFCFTA is all about. So that sensitization needs to continue. You know, but in all, I am saying that can we broaden a conversation towards having a private sector bill of rights? Your Excellency, permit me to push this back to you. And then for Africa Business Council, I listened to you. I've listened to you severally. You've been doing a lot of canvassing and advocacy, and I think you've given a lot of traction to the body. But the issue is this. Private sector forum. Where are the big players? Where's Dangote? Where's Boasment? Where are all of them? They are all supposed to be part of this forum. We're not seeing them. Don't they believe in what we are doing here? I'm just speaking on issues. I mean, across the continent, we've got the big players. We are not seeing them. It is when they are available, they will hear from us. We can key into them. They can understand the SMEs better. And then when the SMEs play their critical roles, the prosperity that we seek, according to Aspiration 1 of the Agenda 2063, we will now have for the continent. So I think that we should have that somewhere in our minds to begin to address. And then finally, for the question that was put forward by Mr. Shah, what is stopping Africa? Well, you know that as well as we do. Everything is stopping Africa. The will to take action. Trust. We are working in silos. If we hold our hands to cooperate with each other, to collaborate with each other, and then finally to be able to take actions and communicate, I think we will do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The questions will be responded to. You have the floor.
Thank you very much,
We'll
Chair.
the responses.
My name is Victor Ogallo, the Deputy CEO for Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Looks like the main question is what Dr. Vimal posed, what is stopping Africa? I've studied this question for some years. And I also looked at some of the SMEs that were established 40 years ago, and they're still SMEs. So the question also could be turned, why are some SMEs remaining SMEs for 40 years? And so again, integration, Asia, Southeast Asia was able to integrate. And when did we start this conversation of integration in Africa? Since our independence, right? It came from Kwame Nkrumah. And so for 60 years, actually, we've been talking about this same question. Yeah. And looks like we haven't found the answer. But maybe you'd agree with my findings. In Southeast Asia, what actually I've found out is that their integration was driven by markets and tangible economic initiatives. And in looking at Africa, our integration has relied a lot more on politically driven process, which is, as you know, led by big people in big summits. There was a time in 2017, we took a business trip to one of the EAC countries, KEPSA versus the equivalent of KEPSA in that country. And we agreed, the business community in both countries agreed on what needed to be resolved. But our own governments of both countries disagreed with us. Here we could sit and agree as a business community on really what we need to do. But then there's a stoppage. There are breaks, political breaks. That is stopping us. Why is it that when the business community across Africa have agreed on really what needs to be done, they find serious roadblocks by their own governments? That is stopping us.